Hi, this is Eric from the Mixercist, and today we are talking about how to create front-to-back depth. It was Jimmy Page of the iconic rock group Led Zeppelin who said that distance makes depth, and that's the concept we're going to look at. Sound waves are fascinating and complex. They're three-dimensional, they have physical size, they exhibit behaviors like dispersion, reflection, and diffraction. For our purposes today, we'll be using some ray tracing illustrations to show how changing the distance that a sound has to travel changes the arrival time, and how we can use this to create the effect of different positions from front to back. And we'll be using Acoustica Audio's Silver Reverb plugin to demonstrate the effects and how to set them up. The direct line of sight is the shortest path, and because everything has to move at the speed of sound, it arrives at the listener first. If there is nothing else in the environment to reflect the sound, the listener will only hear the direct path. But when you introduce a reflective surface, such as a floor, the listener receives the direct sound, followed by a reflected sound. In our day-to-day life, the ground is almost always there, and it's usually no more than a few feet away from our ears. The reflected sound arrives so quickly after the direct sound that it doesn't register as a separate echo, but rather as a tonal shift and as a reinforcement. Let's add a rear wall for some longer reflections. Because the source is close and the wall is farther back, there is a perceptible delay between the direct and reflected sound arriving at the listener. This delay is in effect a pre-delay. So on Silver, let's add pre-delay both to our reflections and reverb tail, and we can hear how the effect can be added while still maintaining the sense of an upfront source position. Let's move the wall further back and see that the difference in arrival time between the direct and reflected sound is now even longer. So on Silver, let's increase the pre-delay. Let's also increase both the size and the decay time of the reverb to represent the larger space we created by moving that wall. So if you want to keep the sense of a source being close to you but in a large environment, pre-delay is critical. So what happens when we move our drums against the rear wall? When we want a position that's farther back? Things get interesting. The direct sound now has a farther distance to travel to the listening position than it did when the drums were up front, whereas the distance of the reflected sound has been reduced. The net effect is that the direct and reflected sounds arrive at the listener closer together in time, and this equates to less pre-delay. Also, the direct sound is now farther from the listener and is going to be quieter in relation to the reflected sound, which will now seem comparatively more pronounced. To simulate this, we'll reduce the pre-delay and we'll turn up the levels of reflections and reverb. Note how the sound is no longer right in the speakers, right in your face. It sounds like it's in the back of the room. Also, notice that the direct and reflected sounds are less distinct from one another, more blended. So, pre-delay should be used on a reverb when an upfront position is desired, while using less or no pre-delay is more consistent with sound sources placed at the back. Another useful tip is to use high-frequency roll-off for any sounds you want to place more in the back. The farther that a sound has to travel through the air to get to the listening position, the more high frequencies it will lose. So this is always something that you can use to help sell the effect. That's all for now. See you next time.